Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
Well, it's going well. I mean, we're here. This is our celebratory 10th anniversary episode. So we're going to do some highlights today, but we're also back at home, which is nice to be back at home. So yeah, things are going well. And how about you? How a post-book launch, and this is the launch of yours and Marley Blonsky's book at Sea Otter. How were we happy with the launch? How did this all end up?
We talked about it in last week's episode, but the Ragtag Best Friends Bicycle Club by All Bodies on Bikes co-founder Marley Blonsky is out in the world. Super excited. People are, talking about it on their socials, reviewing it. Thank you for that, by the way. And orders are still coming in through Strong Girl Publishing. I'm seeing orders on, bookshop.org and, of course, Amazon and all those places. It's just been really, really fun to see this first children's book from Strong Girl Publishing out in the world. Hard to believe I've now been doing this for, I actually cannot remember now if it's 3 or 4 years.
Which?
Strong Girl Publishing, since I came up with that.
Okay.
And launched that. I feel like we often have our wildest, craziest plans and ideas happen when we're on our winter training camp thing. The idea for Strong Girl Publishing came up when we were in North Carolina in Brevard training a few years ago. And this podcast came up 10 years ago, back in April of 2026, while we were...
2016.
2016, sorry.
Right, 10 years ago, yeah.
Time flies. We were in Big Bear after a camp that we coached, and it was right before Sea Otter, and we decided to launch this podcast. I was laughing the other night, I thought about it, I was like, I remember in 2016, you and I being like, yeah, but I mean, does everyone have a podcast? Are we too late to the podcast game?
Mm-hmm.
So...
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, you've started 5 podcasts with other podcasts in that time. Okay, well, why don't we get into... So our thought today was we'd go through sort of some common elements, some threads, some learning, some favorite guests, and sort of weave that into about 5 sort of points, I guess, that we're going to sort of run through. We'll link to any of the shows. I'll try and get through, take good note here of the different episodes. Some of them go back as far as 2016. If you do want to go back and review or listen for the first time to those episodes, we'd be thankful for that. But otherwise, I think we'll just sort of go through some good concepts, which I think are always good to review and talk through.
Yeah, we had 42 hours of driving to go through and figure out what our sort of top takeaways were. And before we say that, also a huge thank you to all of our guests over the years. We've had so many amazing people. We had a whole list, and now I'm even blanking on just everyone. But
well, I have a list here.
Yeah,
so
do you want to hit us with some of our favorites?
Yeah, so I mean, in no particular order, but we have sort of for me, there's Joe Friel we've had over the years. We had Dean Golich way back. So these are coaches who I've really looked up to. And one of the things I really appreciate, maybe why we even started this part of it, was that the podcasting really lets you connect with people that maybe you wouldn't have a reason or even access to. Molly's lucky. We're a little different because you do get access to a lot of these people through journalism and writing articles. And you can say, I'm writing for Bicycling Magazine or these different things. So you do get to talk to a lot of people. But to talk to these people for an hour, to sit down with Dean Golich, this was around our wedding, was the first time we sat down with Dean Golich. Dean Golich was is coach of very top athletes in a bunch of different sorts, but including people like Katarina Nash, who have been to the Olympics and World Championships and all these different things. So different coaches, that's been stuck out for me, but we've also had, I'm going to go through again list. So we had the Megan Roche and David Roche on, so happy runner, big running coaches, Molly's coach as well. Steve Magnus, also running coach, Dr. Stacy Sims, Dr. Steven Seiler. We had Frank Overden. We've had another great coach, Marco Altini, has been on with HRV for Training, and Marco keeps getting more and more popular, I think, as people realize he's really smart. He's associated with Ago, who we had the founders on there, Bruna and Fabi, as well just recently. We've certainly had Katarina Nash on, Jeff Kabush as well on. We had Ellen Noble and Phil Guyman. Dr. Stephen Chung has been one of our, I think he's on number 4. He likes to keep the lead on the frequency, and we love him for that. He talks about our heat and our cold. as well. Matt Fitzgerald, one of your, I think, authors, someone who's been inspirational to you and has written the book Faster is one I always refer to as Run Faster. He wrote with Brad Hudson, so another big running book that I love. Chris McDougall.
I was just going to say, and yeah, we've gotten to have my two favorite authors on.
Chris has been back a couple times. Born to Run, though, is like one of the, you reread that book often.
Literally every pre-race
okay.
is a reread of that.
We had Rebecca Rush, Kate Courtney, Dave Epstein, who has a new book out, the Starrettes, Kelly and Juliet. So that was also like a dream one. A few of the episodes we've had over the years, I've like sweat and been like really nervous for.
That was a big one.
So there's them. And then Katie Bowman would be another one that I recall the first time just being so nervous.
We were in your mom's closet recording that one.
Just to try and get the sound as good as we could, because we were talking to Katie Bowman, who's a biomechanist and has written a lot about different movement and really has, I would say, correct but different views on a lot of the different things around like furniture and how much we're sitting throughout the day and that sort of thing. So she is great and has been on a couple times. We have the Your Diet Sucks crew, Kylie Van Horn and Zoe, who are always fun and really funny as well, but also really smart. Stevie Smith, Stevie Lynn Smith.
One of my authors.
One of the authors, also a dietitian. Dan John and Dan Cleather, which, aren't a package deal, but do overlap and are both great people. And again, both people that I am always nervous to talk to, but also excited to talk to. Celine Yeager as well.
One of my all-time favorites.
From the...
I say, like, whenever I'm asked who is someone I've like look up to or like wanted to emulate, she is always the number one.
Okay. And again, we're going to miss so many people, but this is sort of the list of people I put in. We've had Sven Nys.
You got to shout that one out.
And we've had Terry Orlick and also I should say Simon Marshall. And both Terry and Simon have passed away.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but those were both such great episodes.
Fantastic people, fantastic episodes. Highly recommend. We'll link to them in the show notes to go back and listen to.
Yeah. But this happens with time, I guess, right? But yeah, great that we could spend an hour with those two people. Terry Orlick wrote Total Immersion Swimming, which is a very differing view of swimming and learning to swim, but one that like just for me was transformational as we did Ironman. And just as the book, like as I always like sports books are really hard to write in because it's like you should go and swim and do the sport. But when you have a sport book that really captures something and is motivating and has a great like layout that really gets you started on it. And that actually spiraled out because we went on a trip to like Pittsburgh and went and like I worked with a couple people who did total immersion and stuff, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, and then Simon Marshall with his wife Leslie Patterson wrote The Brave Athlete, which I would say is honestly the first popularized book on sports psychology that really broke proper psychology down in a way that made sense for athletes. So it wasn't just kind of a motivational speaking kind of book. It was genuinely a psychology book about sports psychology, but still very readable, which honestly stands the test of time. I think that came out probably 2015, 2016, and is still a fantastic read.
Excellent. So that's a list of people. Hopefully, sparks some interest. But we'll put those links at the bottom of the episode show notes, and you can sort of click on all those names if you find a name or hear a name that you like.
Yeah. And side note, also huge thank you to everyone who's submitted questions over the years, because that really helps us figure out what we should be talking about. Honestly.
And we do have a few listeners that have listened from the beginning. So like, thank you so much for sticking with us and sort of going along the way here.
Hopefully we've gotten a little better since the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. So you had written out a couple things and I sort of added to it, but the one sort of like overarching theme, I think because this is sort of like a health and fitness, physical culture type podcast, it has been around sort of nutrition, which then goes to weight loss and power to weight in endurance sport. And so there's been sort of this right from the Dean Golich episode, probably the most quoted thing. We've done multiple, like, remember this episodes over the last 10 years. And it was that Dean Golich episode. And he said something, we sort of asked like, how do you deal with power to weight? And he sort of said like, I don't really do that much with it. I focus on the power and make sure that there's just good general nutrition and like whatever that means, but like, general nutrition. And that gets most people where they need to go. And then when they get to that Olympic level, and we do need to be really concerned about quote unquote race weight, that's when an RD and a physiologist and that sort of the group of people, that team would come into play. So I don't know that we have the exact quote, but the sort of idea would be like focusing on the routine, the power, the doing versus trying to shrink ourselves, I guess. And that's been an ongoing theme. And increasingly as the carbs and the eating has come back into sports culture.
Yeah. So back in 2016, I remember when we recorded that, we were at a coffee shop in Ellicottville, New York, because we were getting married the next day and we needed to record this episode because from apparently week one, we were like, this is going to be a weekly show. It doesn't matter if we have a wedding or anything else.
We've taken 1 week as a break. I don't know if we went away or if we just like took it. We were like, we should probably skip 1 week. So we've skipped 1 week in 10 years.
But we've also done a lot of weeks where we did 2 episodes because in 2020, when everyone was just trying to find stuff to do, we were like, yeah, we can totally do 2 episodes.
We did. Yeah. And there was this theory, and it's probably true, but if you put 2 episodes out, then you get more downloads in the week. I mean, I think that makes sense. But
tracks. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I remember that episode because 2016, if you've been in endurance sport for the past 10 years, 2016 was really I'm going to say, height of the paleo, the low carb, the keto diet, all of those things. Race weight was still a very common thing to say. I feel like in 2026, you almost have to like whisper the word race weight. Like it's almost like taboo to mention the idea of weight loss.
Like now,
yeah. But back in just a decade ago, weight loss was still very much, I think, a thing in cycling. Right?
Oh, yeah.
There was a reason we asked Dean Golich the question, is because we were getting that question a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but like I always just dealt with watts. Like I never did watts per kg, and I don't know if it was around then when Zwift and that sort of stuff came, and then like suddenly kids were weighing themselves, and I was like, this just doesn't seem correct. Like you should be able to get to adulthood riding your bike without having to think about how much you weigh.
100%.
So that's, I don't know if the Zwift and that sort of stuff, that was sort of where that was being motivated from or what, or like you say, just the like eating is cheating and everyone sort of trying to do that.
I think you're right. The watts to kg thing 100% is due to, and no shade to Zwift here. They have to measure it somehow. I get it.
In their defense, like it's like online, like each sports. It's just they've become, I guess, in our heads, the Kleenex of esports.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, no shade to these online platforms, but it's really the first time that watts per kg became this very common thing to be talking about, not just for the pros, but for everyone. And you know your number.
And so it was about till that 2020 approximately where there was still that like fasted rides and energy availability, the fuel, the work required, which is still sort of around and still sort of true, but like has sort of changed meaning a little bit. But you would see all sorts of these like pro riders, people posting on Strava that like this was a fasted ride. And then suddenly everything sort of shifted where now we're fueling and the carbs are everything. And you rarely see someone post that it was a fasted ride.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all of that is obviously very much for the better. We've learned so much. I would say one of our biggest changes personally over the years has been eating more. Like, I eat more carbs throughout the day, and I would say I was never a low carb athlete. When you met me, I was not a low carb human. I've never been. But now I would say I eat much more than I used to.
Well, and you had a quote here. Where was it? That as fueling goes up.
Oh, yeah, so when Stevie and I were working on Power Up, a young woman's guide to sports nutrition, available at strongerpublishing.com, one of our main tenets in the book is when training goes up, eating goes up.
Which makes sense, but I do have a number of athletes who, they do struggle with like eating, I guess, period. And that isn't always as, like, when Molly said that, you probably nod your head that, like, yeah, when you train more, you should eat more. But there's a subset of people that doesn't compute. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just like their brain does not process. It means like if I'm eating more, then I should be able to train more. But these are people who are under eating to start, right? And so it's not always like quite as obvious like how that interacts. And so we do need to eat enough. And so that is like a big thing. And I think for me, that was actually like a realization that like in that 2016 period, there was this big push that like, oh, it's like your digestion is off and like your gut and like your gut health, and you need to eat these like pure foods to make your gut better. and then you cut out all these foods. So everyone was, as you say, paleo or gluten-free or whatever, which I was guilty or guided down that way. And then it sort of occurred to me as the red S became more prevalent. This is the idea of like under eating, relative energy deficiency in sport.
Which formerly was the female athlete triad. So I think there's a lot of people that really just lump that into a young woman's problem, especially because the primary indicator of it is you lose your period.
Right.
So that means menopausal women aren't going to have it. Men aren't going to have it. So changing it to red S.
So then as that stuff became this like carbs and fueling and this sort of stuff, and then red S became more prevalent, like, and then we started having guests, because I do treat these episodes as also like personal therapy as well. So we had people like Your Diet Sucks, again, Kylie and Zoe, and just these recurring sort of concepts around fueling. And then with red S, like a lot of the symptoms actually look a lot like what they previously would have said was like, oh, your gut's off because of the foods you're eating. Like you don't talk, and it's like, well, also your gut, it can be off when you're under fueling and like over exercising, depending on how you want to look at that. So that was sort of, for me, was like revolutionary, where I was like, well, maybe it isn't, like maybe I need to be like looser with food and eat more, and maybe I'll see a lot of this stuff and improve.
Yeah, I think the problem athletes face really is what works for the general sedentary population, or is maybe considered like good health advice for the general sedentary population, is not good advice for athletes, is really what we've talked to so many different dietitians about. I actually found this exact thing. I was doing a big feature on poop for a Canadian running magazine. It's out now.
On the title page. Yeah.
On the title page. Everyone should check it out. I am so proud of this article. But that was actually every dietitian I talked to, and I talked to like 7 different dietitians for this article. Every one of them, I said, like, what's the main reason that runners are going to be having like diarrhea and all these issues on the run? And they all said it's probably that they're not eating enough, which is so ironic. For like, the irony here is, you know, you're like, how do I stop pooping on the run? Okay, I'm going to eat less before I run. And you're just creating this vicious cycle where actually eating less is making you have more gut issues, but you keep eating less to fix the gut issues. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
And you could see there being some nuance there of like, maybe there is like a bit of a timing of the food or something like that. Like obviously, like don't, eat a large salad before you go running or something like that. So that's been a theme. Is there anything else? So we had the Watts, and then we should mention, like, we've had like Alex Larson as well on recently with her like Carbs Culture t-shirts, as well. We mentioned Your Diet Sucks is a great episode. If you want to like get really into that sort of idea and push yourself more in that direction, they might be great people to sort of do that and keep you laughing while you do it. Is there any other people that we mentioned Stevie? We mentioned your book with Stevie.
Yeah, I think those are all the main ones for sure. Now, all of this said, there's obviously so much nuance to all of this. So every time we have a dietitian on, the answer is always, it depends. Honestly, it depends should be the theme of like, what's the 10-year overall takeaway from this podcast? It depends. Every athlete is going to be different. Every person is going to be different. Some people aren't training very much and, would be healthier if they lost weight or any of that.
You say like the right person to hear the wrong advice,
It's, I feel like every time we are on this podcast, I always get really stressed that the person who needs to hear this advice is listening and is ignoring it. And the person who doesn't need to hear it is like nodding along like, you're right, I should quadruple my Reese's peanut butter cups in the evening. Right. She says, as someone who eats Reese's peanut butter.
And that gets to what you were saying about the endurance athletes sometimes don't like the general advice of like, just move more and like eat less, move more, like probably is okay advice like for some people. But when you're already moving enough, like what do you do with that? Like, do you actually move more? Like, is that actually like, you know what I mean? So that advice sort of doesn't know where you are on the map, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. So all that to say, one other thing we've probably learned from especially this crew of people is it's always really worth it to consult an expert, whether it's a coach or a dietitian or a combination thereof. So highly recommend any of the people that we've had on. Okay. The next one. Obviously, we have to mention it. Stacy Sims is one of our most popular guests for a reason, and she is the woman who popularized the concept of lifting heavy shit, particularly for women. But we've also had other guests on, whether you're talking about Dan John or Joe Friel or any of them, that have also said, yes, even your cycling men to get better on the bike.
Even you, yeah.
Even you, your little T-Rex arms, you got to lift some heavy stuff.
That's right, yeah. And so we've been beating this from the beginning. Consummate Athlete was like cross training, which yes includes strength training, and I would say in 2016 that's like definitely something that's evolved. Is like no one people would still come because we are okay with cross training and strength training. In especially the cycling world, there's a lot of coaches and systems where it's just like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. In running, I know it's changed a little bit. You see that since the pandemic when suddenly everyone couldn't do running all the time, or they were training more or whatever. They were locked in their home and they couldn't run. Suddenly it's like, oh, strength training's okay to do.
I'm going to say it's still grudging in a lot of spaces in the running world. And
Right.
it's more of a, well, if you must for your overall health and longevity.
Right. Maybe you're getting old, but I'm not. Yeah.
But yes, you must for your health and longevity. But also, I think it's pretty good for your fitness and whatnot.
Yeah. And so there's been a few things, like I think this was just, I'm a kinesiology student. Like I just like sports. So I think, was I a genius because of this? No, I think it's just probably stuff that I liked and like I think is correct mostly for most situations and people. As always Molly says, it depends. What are you trying to do? Are you in the Tour de France or are you not in the Tour de France? Right? Like it does depend a little bit on the time of year and the exact thing you're trying to do and at what level. But we do think that this like lifting of strength training apparatus is important. I would say the nuance that I always find with this lift heavy shit, and I try and like adjust for people, and I don't think it's that Stacy thinks this, but I think it's that you see the image on Instagram of someone lifting what looks like some heavy weights, and it's usually
always a trap bar.
Always a trap or bar or a hex bar, these like big sort of deadlifting bars that sort of like surround you on the ground, which are great to have.
Always sweaty, always in a sports bra.
But what is heavy really depends on where you are on the map, where you're starting from. So starting strength training, and I had to talk to Matt Pioro, our good friend and the editor at Canadian Cycling Magazine, and he was like, I'd like to include more strength training. People say this is a good idea, but I am like he is a skinny little cycling man and journalist man mostly, right? So he was like, I'd like to do this. And I said, well, you don't have to do, like, just start with the push-ups and some little lunges in your office, like 10 times of each. And like, that's more than you were doing. And that's going to be beneficial. We don't need to do a ton more on day one, but we need to start establishing the rhythm and letting your body adapt to it. What most people do is they go to the gym once, they do the trap bar really, really heavy. They look like the Instagram ad, and then never again will they return to the gym because they've either injured themselves or they were so sore they couldn't bike or run for weeks or whatever happened. So that's the nuance I think we add in there as well with the lifting of the heavy stuff. And I guess the other sort of supporting ones for that is has to be Joe Friel's Fast After 50 book. Like if we summarize that, it's very similar takeaways to the Roar books that Stacy wrote alongside Celine Yeager.
100%. Yeah. And yes, we always say until we moved into this house where we have a garage so we can have a squat rack, we were using a 55-pound adjustable dumbbell for everything.
Pretty much,
you had a slightly heavier kettlebell that you used for some stuff, but for the most part, our heavy thing was 55 pounds.
That's
and
right.
we have made that work just fine. So it does not need to be a big fancy setup.
Yeah, and I think this is where people like Katie Bowman, where I say like some of her views are like almost a little counter, where she would say like, well, people have been aging for a long time and not doing trap bar deadlifts, but they maybe were carrying things for long distance to, buckets of water or whatever they were carrying, kids. So people do age well without this stuff. Now, could we age slightly better? Possibly. Like, there could be an enhancement there, but are there other ways to age well and preserve muscle? Because building large amounts of muscle is also very expensive to do, right? Like it is, the body has to maintain that. So there's sort of a balance there. So I try and look at those different views, but the commonality is that like we need to be moving and doing like heavy work, if you will, or Katie Bowman would call this like, I think, big body work or something like that. She has a term like that for it. So that's sort of a good one. But the Joe Friel Fast After 50 is sort of a similar concept of like, we need to keep doing intensity, even though we don't want to as we get older. And then also we need to incorporate strength training to help stop some of the loss of muscle as we age as well, and just capacity as we age. Can we get up and down off the floor?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else from you as far as when we think about the strength training specifically?
No, I think actually let's get into the next one. Let's do all day movement and mobility, since we just mentioned Katie Bowman. And this made me think about when we used to, part of our heavy lifting back when we lived in the other condo was we would walk to the grocery store pretty much every other day and do our grocery shop. And that was sort of our afternoon walk. Then we got this tiny dog, so now we walk him. So we do not walk to the grocery store as much. We still walk though.
Yes.
So this idea of, honestly, it's funny, especially pro athletes are weirdly super lazy most of the time. And they're supposed to be, right? Like professional cyclists, professional runners, they do their workout and they're supposed to sit with their legs up and recovering all day. That's part of the training thing. But that's not necessarily the best thing for the rest of us. Honestly, it's probably not even the best thing for them in terms of long-term health.
Yeah, it depends what your goals are, right? Like it is.
Yeah, so that's why we've always loved Katie Bowman's like whole concepts on walking more, just adding more different kinds of movement into the day. We have not gotten to the point where we've gotten rid of our couch or anything, but that's the general idea. A lot of sitting down on the floor, getting back up. Honestly, the van life thing is perfect for this because my God, the number of step ups I have to do every day to get into that stupid thing. And we've also gotten to have Kelly and Juliette Starrett on talking about same thing. I mean, they were into the standing desks, the treadmill pads, all that stuff way before it was cool.
Well, and one idea that I took from them was this idea of like taking calls or watching your show, but like using the coffee table or a lower table in your home. And just sitting on the floor. So a lot of us aren't doing anything, or maybe just sitting listening to a Zoom call. They can't even see you, like your video's off, so you can really do whatever you want. And so rather than sitting at your desk chair for another hour on that Zoom call is can we sit down on the floor? And there's people say, well, what do I do? I say, well, no, your body will guide it. Like you're going to shift because it's very uncomfortable. So you're going to sit cross-legged, side, and then long sitting. You can add formal rolling with some of these massage balls, or you could do stretching, but you also don't have to because you're already putting your joints at different angles and different positions just strictly by sitting on the floor. So that's sort of these things that we can stack. This is a Katie Bowman phrase of stacking these into the day. You're not multitasking. You're just stacking a bit of mobility time with your Zoom call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, walking, the more you can walk, the better. And that's a big one that we constantly talk about, but we cannot stress enough, especially now that the weather is actually getting quite nice out, making the time for that.
Yeah. And again, it's one that can be combined into calls or spending time with a loved one, or, if you have a dog, then you're obviously accomplishing that. But yeah, errands, things like this, commuting that way. And a lot of times this does take care of time that you might be thinking, oh, I need to stretch for 15 minutes. Well, if you go for a walk for 15 minutes, you're getting elements of mobility. Your body really likes that motion. But then you might also be accomplishing something else like a phone call or time in nature or errands or all of the above, going to get the mail or these types of things that we could do driving, or we could outsource it to someone else to do. We could make these things a little harder, right? And sometimes that's the way to think about them is like, can we make this a little harder? Can we take the stairs would be like the classic example versus the elevator.
Yeah, so the park further away in the parking lot.
Okay. So that's all day movement. The stairs, they have a concept too around like mobility, and not sort of like mobility in the way that they sort of popularized mobility and like stretching, but also thinking about the ways that you can move, like how big, or I think they call it a hallway, I believe, if I remember right, is like, can you maintain the ability to do a cartwheel or do a push-up, or like what are the limitations? As we get older and older, there's going to be more of these things where like my arms don't go over my head as well, my one hip doesn't do this, and some of that stuff is unavoidable, so don't feel bad if you have that. But it is thinking about, like, in this Katie Bowman idea of like, when was the last time you sat down on the floor? Like, I know for my dad right now, it's like this becomes a risk because like if you can't get up and down off the floor smoothly, this becomes a fall and can't get back up from the floor. So it is actually training that, and that could be with a weight or not, right? Sometimes it is just strictly up and down off the floor 10 times is a good exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so your next one here, we had this sort of nutrition and the watts versus the power to weight. We had the lifting heavy shit and strength training. We jumped over to the all-day movement, mobility, sitting on the floor and walking. Then we have be intentional was the next heading that you had. Yeah.
So this one has really come up a lot over the years because we hear from so many people's questions are, what race should I do? What training should I do? And a lot of the time we find people, and I include myself in this, we end up in races, signing up for races that we didn't necessarily want to do, or having seasons that we didn't necessarily actually want to have. or just kind of, and I fell into this for a couple of years, sort of training a bit willy-nilly, right? You're just kind of waking up and being like, well, what should I do today? And I think really the key to training effectively, whether you're training for an event or not, is having some kind of plan. Doesn't need to be a super, super intense plan, but some semblance of a schedule, some semblance of order to it, and some intentionality. And we'll get to it later, but I'll say intentionality is not the same thing as having a strong why.
Okay. You wanted to go into the why. I voted against the why, but we'll talk about the why. But I do like that. And that's our book, Becoming a Consummate Athlete. I think a few people actually just in the last week or two have actually been like, hey, I got your book. And then, they want to chat or something, which is fantastic. So it's still available. You can get it at that large bookseller on the internet. Becoming a Consummate Athlete. And so it lays out a bunch of our things around gear organization. And when we say consummate athlete, yes, there's cross training tied into that. You can play a bit of basketball and it's not going to ruin you, and you can actually put it in the hoop sometimes. That's sort of the idea of becoming a consummate or being a consummate athlete. But for us, it's also this organization. A consummate athlete isn't the one on the ride who's like, oh, I forgot to bring food. Oh, I don't have my own pump to pump up my own tire. Oh, my tires are at bad pressure. I never check my tire pressure. There's all this stuff that in our mind, this is the consummate athlete. So it's a lot of other stuff aside from training, all the little things. So when we're talking about this idea of being intentional, that's what we're thinking of. I am going to do one mountain bike race in May, and I'm going to do a fantastic job at it. And this is what I'm doing. This is truly what I'm doing in May, is one mountain bike race. It's a local race, so it's not a big deal to get there. There's a great community around it. All the kids here that I coach with the local team are doing it. But for me, I'm going to do a couple workouts a week on the bike that are doing it. I'm going to really get my tire pressure ready. I'm going to pre-ride. I'm going to go through what my intention for the race, my goals for the race, the key moments in the race, try and prepare for those and do a great job. But I'm also skipping several races I want to do in May because it becomes a bit too much, and now I'm not as specific. And we think that as busy adult people with limited time, resources, energy, money, this is the way to success, is that you sort of have to cut out a couple things, pick one to focus on for now, for this block, for this year. And then, as Molly says, not every day do you have to be like a monk, but say I'm going to do intervals once a week and a long workout once a week, and I'm going to maybe control my intensity rather than being the person that rides at moderate intensity and just is the cliche of endurance training. And we believe that these things are really that's it. That's Masters Racing 101, is just pick something, cut out the rest of the stuff, and then have a bit of focus in that direction so that you're stepping in that direction.
Exactly. Although when I said be intentional, you immediately thought of one of our oldest episodes. We had Dan Gador on to talk about Krav Maga, which this one feels so John Mulaney, street smarts. But his big thing is, basically constant vigilance, to steal a Harry Potter phrase.
Right. Yeah.
But he talked a lot about paying attention to surroundings. We had him on kind of more talking self-defense, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, fantastic episode.
But I
think go back and listen to it.
It was, yeah. And I it's funny you say Harry Potter, because I think he described it walking on a subway, right? Because that's Harry Potter. To get to the school, you have to go
train station.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're just paying attention. And I find in airports especially, but even when I'm out training, you're looking for cars that are going to come out of nowhere, or animals or other people on bikes. And it's just this intention, this attention, what's going on in your surroundings. And so many people now are on their phones or thinking about random stuff on their bike computer versus being really intentional with the workout and being engaged in the workout. So I think there's a lesson there just for actually training or physiology, or doing a good job on a workout. But also I think just this idea of just putting your phone away and scanning the environment and just picking up stuff. It's not always this guy has he's a dangerous person, but also just interesting and funny things. When you're walking through, you notice things, and it's sort of neat. Sometimes just a beautiful thing, look at that flower or something.
Well, I always tell you, I now have my sort of loose acquaintances on the trail, the people that I run into every day, and some of them I do actually stop and chat with, because we've seen each other so many times, and we've made eye contact, we've waved, we have big smiles for each other. So now we, stop and say hello. And it's such a nice part of my run every time, because I make it a nice part. So I'm glad you mentioned, though, staying off your phone, because I think that gets into our last point of training your brain. And that's something that both recent guests, Dr. Scott Fry and Dr. Aaron Ayala, have said when it comes to how do we actually grow this quote unquote like mental toughness or mental grit or any of that. And a big thing that both of them say is you have to do some of your training without music, without podcasts, like just focusing on the training, because when you're racing, guess what you don't have with you most of the time? You don't have music, you don't have podcasts. Some ultras, they let you, but for the most part, like, you're not going to be listening to music. You're not going to have those distractions. And it's really important to get good at listening to yourself and hearing yourself think. It's actually kind of amazing. My headphones died yesterday. So I had this experience for the last 4 miles of my run where I suddenly had to start listening to myself because I didn't have a headphone. And as always, it's fascinating. You just start catching yourself in this stream of consciousness, and not all of it's good. Some of it's okay.
Right.
But you definitely start learning your language, I'm going to say, and realizing, oh, wow, I'm meaner to myself than I thought.
Right. And that is this idea of being the intentional training is that you are dealing with these things that will, in the competition and the challenge and the event that you're doing, whatever you're getting ready for, is that, it's going to come up. And on top of that, then you're also now hearing your feet sliding, right? In trail running, this is, people say, oh, how do you get better at descents? And it's well, it's all your senses. You learn what you're looking for and plotting a line, but you're also listening for hints that you're sliding or on a bad line or that horrible snapping sound when you need to unweight your 1 foot and save a bit of a sprained or broken ankle. All these things are true. The sound is actually one of the things we get along with feeling and looking. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic thing to think about is just where is the intention? Where is the attention going?
Yeah. And the other thing that I just alluded to there is mental toughness. And I think this for me was one of the coolest concepts that I learned in the past year, is that we get so much wrong when it comes to mental toughness. And not to say that I blame people like David Goggins, but I blame people like David Goggins, where it's this ultimate hard, Jocko Willink, all these dudes, where it's just this ultimate hard man, just everything has to be hard. And I think I've had the best results when I haven't felt like it's hard, right? Every race that I've not done well in, every race that I've DNF'd or gotten hurt in or whatever, it was hard. I was in there with this mindset of this is going to be the hardest thing ever. The races that I've won, the races that I've gotten records in, I was having fun. They were the ones that I went into with probably the lightest feeling, the most smiling at people. So I think that doesn't mean that I'm not mentally tough. Obviously, I went into both of the calls with these two people being I don't think I'm mentally tough. And they're are you just ran 100 miles. Of course you're mentally tough. I actually don't think so though. And this is our grit is fit.
If it looks like grit, it's fit. And so that's what they say is that the people who look like they're even for David Goggins, again, no shade, but it is popularizing a certain thing. But that person is just that's the way they're spun up, right? So you could say it's genetics or whatever it is, or just the situation that have led them to be the person they are. So similar for you, you are a great ultra distance runner because of the things that you're made up of. And do you have to work hard to be that? 100% you have to, but as you say, there's a joy element to a lot of it that maybe some other people don't have that fit where they get joy from going out and running for extended periods of time. They say, oh, running sucks. I don't like it. This is boring. I'm scared of nature. I don't like having to go to the bathroom in the washroom or in I don't want to go to the bathroom in the washroom. It's so funny we say bathroom. Anyhow, outside, we don't want to go to the bathroom. And this would be a non-starter. And it's just that's not, we have friends who are just I don't understand how you guys are camping. What do you mean outside? You're sleeping not in a bed? So it's just different people have different things that they are okay with and that they enjoy, right? And so that is something that, as the consummate athlete, again, one of the things we love is cross-training because it gives you different sports, different movements, different activities, which is going to give you new friends in all those different circles, which we do think is good for mental health, for just going through things as we get injured, as life evolves. But also, in the way we say our kids should sample sports, adults need to sample sports because there are different phases of life. There is the phase post-running when our bodies don't maybe like running anymore. Most of us will find that, right? Very few of us are going to be the 100-year-old setting the record for marathoning. Those people, again, just are fortunate and can do that. So that is a great reason to be sampling some sports, especially if you haven't quite found that like love of movement or love of exercise.
Yeah. All right. So there you have it. The 5 main lessons from 10 years of doing this podcast. And we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to share. I mean, obviously your questions are always welcome, but we'd also just love to hear from you if you found value in the podcast. A, if you could rate and review, that would be fantastic. But B, we just love to hear.
Great little gift. Yeah. If you could do that on your favorite podcast. But yeah, like if there was an episode, if you know the episode that you started listening on, that would be great to hear from, or a favorite episode, or even a guest maybe that we haven't had on, or one we should have back. We'd love just a little bit of feedback as we go into the second decade, because as it does get harder and harder to have ideas and keep talking about this. But we do love it, and we appreciate all of you for listening.
Exactly. All right. Happy anniversary, dear. All right, everyone, happy training, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.